in March, okay, in March of 2022, excuse me, the United Nations programs called upon the faith communities to step forward and certainly take up the challenge in Africa on plastics. So it became a clarion call to the faith communities, I thought, in doing so. I did some research and found out that no denomination in the US has a resolution. I could find a couple of places of Anglicans in Africa and the Anglican Church in the UK. That's about it. And as I began to investigate plastics, I was becoming alarmed in terms of the rate of use of plastics, the fact that I diligently recycle both in New Hampshire and here, and to realize that the plastic bottles that we brought were never recycled, just burned at the dumps. And that single-use plastics that were collected were not really recycled at all. And so from that, it became alarming that plastic pollutions have basically spread. One of the things as a professor, as well as a pastor, I used with my classes was plastic pollution. And there's this big island of plastics in the Pacific Ocean about the size of Texas at this point in time. And it's really horrific. And so I began to look at the whole process of plastics disintegrating and becoming microplastics and invading our food system, soil, water, air. Even microplastics have been found at the top of Mount Everest. We devour about a credit card of plastics a week. That alarmed me. So when I had a physical, I asked my physician, is there a way of measuring plastics in my body? And he said, no. I said, is plastics harmful to my health? He said, yes. And a week later, in the British Medical Journal, it came out finding plastics in blood transfusions. And so when we think about that and the harmful effects of plastics, which we really haven't fully understood, it was alarming. And the fact that I think it's every minute or 5 minutes, 9 million plastic bottles are bought. You can do the arithmetic on that, and it comes into the hundreds of millions a day of plastics. The plastic single use are disposed as well. And what we've created is basically a plastic epidemic, or pandemic, as I like to say, that is spreading in the environment. And there's a really strong prediction that there'll be more plastics in the ocean than fish by 2050. So certainly it is alarming, and this got us moving. So we drafted a plastics resolution with a team that came from New Hampshire and Florida. We put it together, and we had it vetted by both of our teams, and we began the process of following each of that forums, of following our conferences to get it looked at and then brought to the annual gathering, because most resolutions have to have the support and vote at an annual gathering, or at least 5 churches. I did both to be on the safe side. And it evolved in that the resolution in New Hampshire went to the large UCC New England conference and came back with some changes. And what we had is 2 resolutions that had some differences, and that the resolutions that were sent to the vetting committee were considered to be 2 resolutions, although I said, can't we basically argue to incorporate them? Because the intention really was the same, and we were turned down on that for a good 5 or 6 months until it was interviewed publicly by the UCC press, and it became really kind of nonsensical that 2 separate resolutions would be considered. So we basically rewrote one and merged all the proposals in the resolutions together. I sent the resolution that was plus PowerPoint on plastics and the implementation PowerPoint as well to mark for your use, to expand use and basically educate folks. One of the things I do think that we really need to do is certainly we're planning a whole thing in the fall of webinars on plastics implementation that could be recorded and then given to all our conferences, that could be presented to churches as well on ideas. And I think is the first thing I think it is that we are, as a church environmental justice, we are bonding with numerous environmental organizations, Sierra Club, 350.org, etc. They're really very strong on working on this, and I think it's really a good thing for faith communities to be working with them as well. So there's a good sort of momentum on this. I will, as I uncover other resources, Beyond Plastics is a group that is actively working on the state levels of all the states, but they've just initiated a free course for folks on plastics and dealing with plastics. So I recommend maybe one or two folks, or many, any representative from church, go to it at this point, just to get the information for implementation and beginning to create a viable community. The model I want to use is the model of Jesus and mustard seed. Mustard seed is a very healthy organization. I see church as a mustard seed, and a mustard seed is a weed. It's a noxious weed that spreads virally, and it cannot be controlled. And you don't plant it with other crops. It just it has takeover properties. And the mustard seed also in the ancient world was a form of a drug for healing and so on. So it has medicinal qualities and it has viral spread qualities. I really believe that that is what the environmental justice movement of faith communities have to become. Our churches must become the mustard seed and spread virally. So my little homilet within it at this point in time. Let's get into specific questions. I mean, I gave you a general overview. There was objections raised in New Hampshire about plastic straws and the need for some folks with disabilities needing to use straws. It was also raised the question about IVs, transfusions, etc. Plastic. That is less than 1% of the single-use plastics. So if we work at the mitigation of plastic bottles, as well as single-use plastics and straws, we would make a significant, I think, indenture within it and bring the plastics down. So let me.
And I'd just like to interject that the concerns about medical plastic and about the need of some constituent groups to use plastic came at the local vetting level. And it allowed us to hear and then answer concerns so that by the time we got to the national level, we had presupposed any concern and really had an even better resolution as a result. But please, let's hear your questions.
Yeah. I don't have a
brave and unmute and jump in.
Or you can raise your hand down at the bottom in the reactions if a lot of people jump in at the same time, and then we'll call on people.
There's Debbie.
Hi. Aren't there things like bamboo and metal straws that could be used, reused?
There are
what I thought.
also there are metal straws, yes, there are, that are recyclable at this point. I mean, they're good for home. We have some at home. At restaurants, you can push a restaurant to consider paper straws that are workable. Now that gets more difficult when you go into the bar and alcohol setting, because according to bar owners, paper straws melt in alcohol, or at least they dissolve. And so there's some objection to it at this point in time. But I think that we can push certainly paper straws at this point as an alternative.
Right.
And Debbie makes a wonderful point. We are first going for the low hanging fruit. We are coming for everyone's coffee hours at church. And we're going to try to eliminate single-use plastics where it's easiest and best, and gain momentum after that tough last 10 to 15%. But we can do so much with the easily replaced single-use plastics.
The other thing too is I never buy or use a bottle of plastic bottle of water. I think we could begin to start to downsize that in our churches by first putting in fountains that a lot of universities have, which is basically a fountain for water bottles. And that would be really reducing the usage of having basically bottled water, plastic bottles at this point in time. The other thing that I think it runs into difficulties, a lot of churches, the UCC has a number of churches with schools attached and lunches taking place. So there's an objection because the lunches arrive in plastic at this point in time. And that's an issue that we'll have to deal with later on. But I think the focus needs to be on single-use plastics that we take to grocery stores and stores. We could also begin, I know of a church that was starting to knit sort of basically carry-ons that you could take to the grocery store to carry your goods at this point in time. Use paper as opposed to plastic. We can begin to work at that and really kind of reemphasize that. I think we can start by, you can even start before General Assembly by promoting a Lenten plastic fast. We're going to do that. And there's some churches that have already done that, a number of Lents. We're also targeting that Earth Day is going to be a major push on plastics for the UCC at this point in time. I think those things and really educating at a local level. I know that at universities, we have to kind of move away from plastic bottles. And if you go to a university, in many of the halls, they have vendors with plastic bottles on water, sodas, etc. That is going to be a problem. Supposedly, advertising here in Florida, basically Pepsi and Coke are committing themselves to recyclable plastics. Now we'll have to hold their feet to the fire on that, because I'm not sure that they're going to continue to maintain that at this point in time. So
Bruce, you have your hand up, please.
Actually, we have Becky. Becky's had her hand up the longest.
Okay, thank you, Mindy. Mindy,
All
I'll
right.
let you do it.
No. I just want Becky to have her say. She's waited.
okay.
Take it away, Becky, please.
Okay, I belong to a group called 100 Grannies for a Livable Future. And we've been
good.
working on plastic for 10 years at least.
Good.
And I agree. I don't buy any drinks in a plastic bottle. If I need something, I'll buy a glass bottle if I can find one. Otherwise, I just go thirsty if I'm not where I can get something. But I've been working at home on all kinds of things. My husband gets in trouble because once in a while he brings home a plastic bag. And in our town, we had our city council. I live in Iowa City, Iowa. We had our city council ready to do something about banning plastic bags. And our state just all of a sudden wrote a bill and signed it. And we can't ban plastic bags in Iowa. And so now that just really.
Yeah, and let me throw a interesting part to that. And that is because the state is aligned with fossil fuels. Fossil fuels, petroleum products are made into plastic, and the divestment that's taking place with many corporations in the fossil fuel industry is leading them to kind of pressure to kind of look, how can we use that? And they create plastic plants basically in situations, not like Beverly Hills, but in places with peoples of color and low-income places, and that is polluting. That is a form of environmental racism, and we included that in the basically the description that we were talking about as well, to address that as a form of environmental racism. And
Yeah.
and also, I will say there was a webinar that the UCC did, and basically it was an interesting one on how to find out how much money each congressperson gets from the fossil fuel industry. And it's
Yeah.
both Democrats and Republicans.
Right.
So you need to know, basically, the fossil fuel industry basically buys politicians. And so
Yeah.
that's not surprising that that was overruled.
Yeah, yeah. My question now is, we've been doing a lot of work and within our group, but trying to get other people to do stuff is not always that easy. But we have, and we table at lots of events, and so we have lots of information about plastic. That's one of our, we do lots of other things too, but how do we get companies who are using so much plastic in their packaging, to stop, to move to something else? Because it's you can walk in the grocery store and it's really hard to
Mhm.
find things. I mean, I really try not to buy stuff in plastic, but sometimes there just isn't an alternative.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to focus on whatever we can to mitigate the use of plastics.
Okay.
I think it's a strategy of mitigation and to build up a momentum over time. And to even raise the question, I wonder how much plastics people are digesting from the
Yeah.
usage. And that suddenly becomes very alarming when you go out to dinner and you're with a whole group of folks and I'm saying, I wonder how much plastics we're all ingesting. Of course, that stifles any sort of conversation and brings it to an end. But
Yeah.
I think that at this point in time.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder for myself at this point.
Yeah.
The conversation we have to have locally at this point, and the wondering and the personal testimony is really very important.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
My hand down.
Bruce, you're next.
Thank you, Becky. I am thrilled to hear the two of you this evening. I don't know if you're aware, but Creation Justice Ministries, which is the spinoff from the National Council of Churches, does an annual Earth Day resource. And for 2024, they're planning one on plastics. And they're hoping to have that done by January in order that it gets wide usage this time round. I am sure they are aware of your resolution and the Methodist one and the draft of the Presbyterian one, which will hopefully be developed in the coming weeks. But it is good to see broad ecumenical support for this effort. The question I have, since I will be part of the drafting team for the Presbyterian version, have there been significant articles or studies that have been released since your most recent resolution was passed? Anything new that we should be aware of to incorporate in the Presbyterian one?
That I have to confess, I really don't know. But I certainly would recommend doing a search online. And one of the best ways of really doing that is go to Sierra Club, go to 350.org and its various Beyond Plastics, and begin to kind of look at what are the articles that are there. Do a Google Scholar search on plastics and health, plastics and pollution at this point in time. That will update you on a lot of information at this point. It's almost impossible to keep up with it, but certainly I would do that at this point in time, and also be able to articulate what faith communities are doing on this, so that the Presbyterians are joining other faith communities as an effort. And I'd really say, look at the call of the United Nations programs in Kenya in 2022 that called upon the religious faith communities globally to participate in that. And I see that as a call of the Spirit for us to, a call to action. I would like to put ourselves within that kind of workage at this point, because certainly people in less developed nations are experiencing plastic pollutions without many options at this point in time of escaping it. And so it certainly is a justice issue. And as I said, it's an environmental race issue as well.
Bruce, to jump in quickly, it's not like you won't be hearing from us between now and when you need to present your resolution. And as new things come across our desks, you can count on us being in touch with Mark and with you and with the rest of your group.
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to hoard any information at this point. We want this to go, as I use the mustard seed parable, we want this to go viral. So in whatever ways we can support, pray, and help you in any ways, we'd like to at this point.
All right. We have Curtis next.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Actually, when we go about trying to solve a problem like this, we can take both personal action and action as a group. And having worked a good deal in trying to deal with CO2 mitigation through Citizens Climate Lobby, one of the things that helps is if you're going to act on a personal level, is to have a calculator to try and determine how much you are contributing to the problem. So my first question would be, does anybody have a reasonable way of estimating what I as a person could do to calculate my plastic footprint? And the corollary of that is actions you can take as a person to reduce it. And so the second part of this question is, does anybody have a list that a reasonable person living in an industrial United States could do to try and mitigate that? And the third thing is, other than this group, what other groups are working in this space other than the one that Mark put in the chat related to the course, that URL that he just sent to us? So I've asked three things here, and I don't know much about any of it. So thank you.
I may have one suggestion, because I heard about it from a UCC clergy that was at the conference representing me. I couldn't attend. She talked about, she learned of a college, a Presbyterian college, that gives an app out to all the students that measures their usage of plastic. So that may be something to research. I was going to research this, but I just heard about it last week. So that would be a very interesting thing to look at. What are the apps on this, on plastic usage? I mean, this is being given to students to measure how much plastics they're using. So that may be a thing to use, and that would be really good for a Lenten fast too.
Yeah, and then the second part of this is that if you have that information, the question is, what things do you do other than, I personally don't buy soft drinks in plastic bottles. I don't buy bottled water. That's one thing, but that impact of mine is small compared to all the other things that I purchase. I guess I could swear off Amazon Prime, but what else do we do? Does anybody have a list?
Curtis, this is one of the things that we're excited about, because we will be working not just with individuals, but with already committed faith communities on a wide scale. And all of a sudden, it's not just one person not buying drinks in plastic bottles, but it's 25 or 50 or 100 who are making a commitment, not just during Lent, not just during Plastic-Free July. And so there's some momentum going forward. And you're asking for best practices, which aren't all committed to paper yet. And it's fun to be walking together as we assemble these lists and share these lists.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like we have Chris with his hand up next.
Yes, thank you. I sit on Sarah, you mentioned Sierra Club. I sit on the National Sierra Club Zero Waste Committee. yeah, as you mentioned, this is a hot topic for us.
Yes.
We do have some information on it. I also work with Judith Thank of Beyond Plastics. So
Yeah.
if you haven't been in touch with her, I'd be glad
have.
to put you in touch with her.
Yeah, we have.
I'll also say the two big legislative initiatives, both of the Sierra Club and Beyond Plastics, is bottle bills, because bottle bills are proven to be the best way, percentage-wise, of recovering any material, not just plastic, but all containers, but also what's referred to as EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility Bills.
Mhm.
And that's, we really need those things in place to basically form a way to pay for recycling programs in our communities. Recycling programs are struggling throughout our country. And EPR is seen as a way to basically finance those programs. The one thing we need to make sure that we don't do is put the industry in charge of EPR. So that's always a danger, and we've been working on that in New York State, but there's a number of other states that are doing the same thing. I also just parenthetically, I give talks on zero waste because the last time we took anything to the landfill was in 1992, and any garbage to the landfill. What we have accumulated fits in a grocery bag since 1992. So it can be done. I'll just say that. And if people want some ideas on strategies on how to do that as a family, I'd be more than happy to share that as well.
One of the things that, as pastor, and a pastor who basically greened his church in 2008, 9, and 10, we began to really model for the congregation, bringing down our carbon footprint and living in a drought zone in North Hollywood, and basically water usage and so on. And that spread to households, right, of folks in the church. They started living that way. And then we started doing public information on solar panels. We call them solar nights, and we talked about it. And we had faith communities. We were a church that could talk to the Southern Baptists, but not talk about same-sex marriage with them. But they were interested in the economics of solar panels. I think that we can start with our communities to model that and spread to our folks, and then begin to kind of take a more active role of spreading virally at this point in time. So it's certainly, I think, if our churches could work towards zero waste, it would be a major step forward. I mean,
it's certainly doable. Yeah, I didn't mention we haven't used fossil fuels to power our house since 2013. So it's another thing we have the technology, we have the wherewithal to do all this. We just got to develop the will to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. The next person with their hand up is David. Gail.
It's Gail.
Gail. I'm sorry, Gail.
Actually, it's Dave and Gail, a little bit short.
Dave and Gail. Okay.
Bob, you mentioned at the beginning about looking at pursuing the water bottles as sort of the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Looking at the amounts of plastic and where you go and what you try to deal with, could you kind of walk up the tree a little bit from the low-hanging as to what the targets are, or the more doable things that are could be pursued?
I'll jump in quickly, but I know Bob has something to say. If you go further up the tree, you might be getting yourself into stockholders meetings and shareholders meetings and getting corporate entities to own what's going on. And so there are a lot of ways to witness in the public square. Our friend Bill McKibben is getting the third act group together and going straight for the banks and experiencing a lot of success and a lot of notoriety. So in addition to cleaning up coffee hour, we think that advocacy in the public square is something that faith communities are well attuned to. And I think there are a lot of different ways to speak prophetically and to act prophetically and to really be witness. So that's one quick answer. But Bob, why don't you weigh in too?
I think one starts with one's own organization and denomination. I don't know what the extent within the Presbyterian USA is involved in divestment from fossil fuels. Certainly that has been an issue at the UCC, and we have basically forced the pension and board and other churches and conferences to really consider divesting from fossil fuels. My husband was pastor of a church in in Marlborough, New Hampshire, and they had a portfolio of $50,000 worth of stock in fossil fuels, and he worked on it with them to divest and reinvest in new renewable energies. And the concern that was we're going to lose monies on that was that they equally got an equally good substantial return on renewable energies. I think we have to start there with our own pressure. A number of schools and universities are also divesting from fossil fuels. We need to keep the pressure up on fossil fuels. We need to realize that we need to move towards our buildings moving away from, yes, I have electric and solar panels, but in Florida, we have 16 coal-fired plants that produce basically electricity, and they're polluting at this point in time. So we basically have to kind of look at how we can transition to renewable energies and keep pressure on the fossil fuel companies. But that's part of it. I mean, it's an overall strategy that is so interconnected with the fossil fuel companies. Every bit is going to be really a struggle because we're in a pushback age at this point in time, or maybe a last hurrah, but it's going to be a really hard battle to fight at this point in time. They have the monies and they have a number of politicians' influence. So it's constantly pushing, advocating, divesting, and so on.
All right, I'll call the next person. We have Debbie Blane.
Yeah, hi. These are probably things that everyone knows about and has thought about. I'm particularly thinking of solar panels and the fact that there's so many people that can't afford that kind of thing. So coming up with some kind of a scheme where there's a collective of money that can help people buy them or can buy them for people who are committed to using them. And the other thought I have quite a bit, because I live in an apartment and I would love to do solar instead of paying the power company. I think I'm in a place that has a pretty progressive power company because they do, I believe, some solar projects and some kind of buyback things. But for an apartment dweller, it doesn't make any difference. And I can't go up to the roof and install my own panels. I would really love to see a way to have apartments and other public buildings be able to get solar panels or windmills or whatever, and have it just become normal.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take pressure to do that on the long run, but the Inflation Reduction Act
Mhm.
has provided for the first time extensions of credits to nonprofits, and that includes faith communities.
Okay.
And you can get a 30% credit on it at this point in time. And if you get solar panels made in the US, it's up to 40%. And if you use workers from the US, I think it's even higher, but there's been some really good work on this and webinar presentations. If you want, I can basically send you the UCC one that you can disseminate. It had some really good fine folks going through that law completely at this point in time. And so this works well with faith communities at this point. On an individual basis, there are, again, a lot of credits and tax credits for homeowners. For
Right.
buildings, I know in LA, all new construction has to have the components of solar panels and solar usage. And actually, when I lived there, they were starting to experiment on the highway with solar tiles, which was generating some energy at this point in time. There's going to be a lot of work that is developing on this. And certainly the movement towards electric cars will be a major shift in bringing down some of the greenhouse gases, not all, but some at this point.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you.
All right, Jane, you are up.
Thank you. Yeah, Rob and Bob, just wanted to thank you for your presentation. You certainly are very passionate about this issue. I'm just wondering if you have heard of the fossil fuel industry's Plan B, as in boy.
No, what is it?
Well, we know what the fossil fuel industry's Plan A is, right? And that is to make fossil fuels that we can burn.
It's working very well.
Yes, and so that is, but it's not working very well, and they're very aware of that they can't forever just be making fuels for us to burn in our cars. So they have a very advanced, I'm saying they are very advanced in their Plan B, which is to create plastic production facilities.
Yes, that's what I was talking about earlier.
These things are huge. I lived in Houston, Texas for 17 years and worked with managers at oil refineries. And these plastic production facilities are even larger than an oil refinery. And of course, they're being built in low-income communities where people don't have the resources to fight them. And it's just it's disheartening, and it's hurtful. So that is one place we could be putting a lot of pressure.
Yeah. You're absolutely correct on that, because that's what I was calling in terms of environmental racism. The UCC did a study in 1987 on toxic waste dumps in the United States, and they found that within 5 miles, people's health were significantly impacted, and it was basically Black, Indigenous, Asian, Hispanic communities, never put in a wealthy suburb. They did a study, update study in 2007, and things only got worse at this point in time. And basically what we are seeing is what you're describing is the divestment or movement into kind of subsidiaries of using fossil fuels in other areas for production. And it's harmful to people's health. And certainly it's harmful to the planet. And we've got to unite to fight this at this point in time. I mean, we are a David fighting Goliath at this point.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. Yes.
I mean, but
David won.
We have one thing in our favor, card in our favor. The Holy Spirit, and it's a she, is a mischief maker. She's a trickster, and she colors outside the line, and she's not controllable by the fossil fuel industry. That I would argue is our ace in the bag. And what the Holy Spirit is doing is creating the largest movement of people on this planet really working very hard to save it. And we need to, this is my little homily, next homily. We need to support indigenous peoples because they are 5% of the population and they are preserving 80% of the biodiversity of this planet. We lose biodiversity, we are really talking about human extinction. And I think it's really important to bond and support at this point in time. That's why the rights of nature is the first good step of supporting indigenous peoples, because we're killing their family, nature.
Do we have anyone else who would like to ask a question?
Mindy, could I jump in
Yeah,
and just make
please,
one
please.
point, but I'm going to let Enrique go first. Enrique just shut his hand up.
Okay. Have you heard anything about the fact that, or how true is it that plastic can be recycled only up to 3 times?
I don't know. I really don't know.
But there are many,
Because that basically would undermine all efforts for recycling, which is why the fossil fuels industry is trying to make that basically their plan B.
and recycling is not as effective as we all might think it was, and in fact, gives a lot of people an out. Enrique, I'm really glad you brought up the whole issue of recycling, and that might be something that Bruce and Mark and the other writers consider in maybe even making their resolution more focused or more your own.
Oops.
Go ahead, Jane,
Unmute yourself.
or Debbie.
I forgot to put my hand up first. I
Okay, go
unmuted
ahead.
first,
Go ahead.
so,
Go ahead, Debbie.
okay.
Hey, David.
Um,
So I'm going to go into my next meeting. I'm going to get off of this webinar. And so I put a quiche in the oven.
that sounds good. Some articles that I've read over the years include things like emergency housing in other countries that's made from plastic, or plastic pellets being used as insulation. Roads, I think someone already mentioned roads that have plastic in them. Another thing that I found kind of by accident on Amazon, there's toys being made out of plastic. And that one I see as more, how would I say, durable. Because if there's a 3-time limit to plastic being recycled, once it becomes a toy, it's going to be passed around for a long time, with one family passing it to another family. They were a little bit expensive, but on the other hand, it might come down with time or with a nonprofit taking it up. So those are just some ideas I wanted to put out there.
Yeah. My husband bought beach towels that are made from plastic at this point. And they seem like normal towels at this point. So there are some recyclings taking place.
Mindy, I'd love to jump in and just make one more point before we close. And I'd love to have everyone look around at this meeting and see if we can guess what the median age is. And that is a concern of mine. One of the things I would urge the Presbyterian Church to do is involve some younger people in this process. We were very fortunate to have one of our main presenters at the General Synod for the UCC, a 17-year-old who was also part of the process and owned everything. The only danger if you involve young adults, middle school, high school, college, is that they would find your churches more relevant and attend more if you do things like climate justice. So why not get out and start recruiting some young people for this initiative? And it might reap results on several levels.
As a college professor too, that taught religion and had environmental issues in all my courses, I found that college students, their first issue were basically the loans that they had. And the second was their concern for climate change and the world that they were living. Imagine a freshman Hispanic student of mine listening to that and raises the question whether she wanted to bring a child into this world. That's a very sobering question. Our young folks are really very much interested in this. And you'll find that that population is not actively involved in many of our churches, most churches at this point. I think that one of the ways we have to do is really become climate change churches and create new opportunities for volunteerism. We need to train young people to replace us older folks, the next generation, and there's energy there, so work at that. My goal and hope was to create a group of trainers to train kids from 16 through 25, put them through issues of advocacy, climate change, and spiritualities of all sorts, and then ordain them as earth protectors, earth keepers, and create a Peace Corps like that, an Earth Corps. Matthew Fox has Guardians of the Earth as one of his works at this point in time. We should be doing that, creating water protectors, earth protectors, etc. That's the church that really the Spirit is calling us to. Yeah, that's my fourth homily for the night.
Jane, did you have something you wanted to say?
I think I'll hold it since we're at time.
Okay.
I have plenty to say, but I won't.
We all do. Yeah, great. Thank you for your time. And again, anything we can assist at this point in time. I'll keep sending resources to Mark that I've come across at this point.
I was going to say, I'm going to put the recording onto the webpage that we already have set up for this webinar, and I will add to it links to all of your resources, and I will email out the link to that page to everybody who registered and beyond. So we'll make it available.
Great. Thank you. Good luck, and our prayers are with you in this process.
Bruce or Mark, did you have any final words?
A reminder, the next webinar will be on August the 1st, and that's going to be looking at the first Tuesday in August, right?
I thought it was the 8th.
No, 1st, I
Oh.
believe.
Okay.
Look for upcoming email about it. But anyway, it'll be featuring Dr. Colin Evans reviewing the latest climate news, looking at the dramatic increases in flooding here in New York and New England, the extreme heat in the South, the horrible hazardous air quality throughout the eastern part of the United States. And that's just in this country, not counting the many other places around the world. Looking at the latest science on that, he's a professor at Cornell University. Then there is the National Conference for Presbyterians for Earth Care on September 20th to 23rd. Details on that, including many speakers from all over the country. The main location being at Massanutten Springs in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, but satellite presentations and gatherings taking place for that national conference in Little Rock, in Minneapolis, and Berkeley, California. All of this is possible because of the generous donation of people that watch this webinar. So please give generously. You'll get an email with the link to this recording to share all the resources the speakers have referenced. And also at the bottom of the page, asking you to give. And we really could use your donations. For example, we want to make scholarships available for those young adult protectors of God's creation to be able to come to the national conference. So give generously and share this recording with many. We've got lots of work to do and we need to do it quickly. Mark, I hope I didn't steal your thunder. Do you want to add anything?
No, in fact, you hit all the things. I was just tossing a couple of items into the chat that people could click on easily.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark.
And my thanks to our two speakers this evening. This was great to hear about the work that has gone on, and we appreciate all of our love to you as well. It's great to see that this made it through so resoundingly at the UCC, and we'll be looking to do the same in our next General Assembly next year. So
I hope
having us.
I was going to say, I hope the Presbyterian overture will be approved and sent from the session of the First Presbyterian Union Church in Owego, New York. Union comes from the fact that it is a union of Congregationalists and Presbyterians. One of the members of this church that brought about that union was a good Congregationalist named Washington Gladden, that I'm sure you social gospel historians are familiar with. So anyway, we'll work together and get a lot more people beyond us to do it together.
Good. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mindy.
Thanks, Rob, Bob, Mindy. Good evening.